All right, can everyone see the screen okay on their end?
Yep,
Yes.
looks good.
Good to go.
All right, good deal, good deal, good deal. So welcome everyone. I see we still have people coming on board to the webinar today. Should be a great session. I'm looking forward to it. Of course, it is now 2:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have our partnership here together with NAMVETS and UPS, the VBRG group. So definitely want to welcome everyone to today's session. As you can see on the screen, NAMVETS. The NAMVETS is the National Association of Minority Veterans. All right, so I chose to use that first photo because we're constantly building. We're building programs. We are building people. We are building our service, trying to perfect it each day as we go. So we're constantly building. So that's what we wanted to kind of lay that out real quick. Our leadership team, of course, Mr. William Sims is our founder. He started the organization many years ago. He's seen a disconnect in as far as minority veterans in particular, to the programs and services that are out there. So we wanted to kind of create that bridge or create an organization that was designed to connect those dots. And that's what we're doing every day. Of course, you see Dr. Xavier Bruce, which is our National Vice Commander. He's on the line right now. So definitely, Dr. Bruce, definitely appreciate you. And then, of course, myself, Sean Carrington. Want to highlight and say thank you always to Ms. Caroline and her team. Definitely, Ms. Caroline, I don't know if you want to say a few words before we jump right into the session, but I definitely want to thank you and your team for this opportunity and of course, for what we're going to be building in the future. Do you have any few words that you want to share?
No, not really, Sean, but thanks again for setting this up and coordinating it. And I think this webinar series has been really great for our group and for me personally, and just look forward to our continued partnership.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I know I kind of put you on the spot, Caroline, so I appreciate I apologize for that. All right. So, but of course, today our speaker is Mr. David Miles. To give you a little bit of information about Mr. Miles, of course, he is a retired Lieutenant Colonel from the Marine Corps. He worked 30 years with Con Edison Company of New York and a project manager for over 45 years. He was responsible for major projects, engineering, new business and contract oversight, construction, consulting, conversation, sales, quality assurance, leak detections, and metering. Mr. Miles has won a coveted management incentive award as a technical program lead person and 2 team awards for successful projects that he respectively served as project manager and incident commander. I'm sure he has a wealth of knowledge that he's going to share with you all also. So today, of course, our session is on conflict resolution. Conflict can happen anywhere. It can happen at home. It can happen at work. It can happen in public. I thought this picture would be perfect for the session. So without further ado, I want to open the floor up to Mr. David Miles. David, the floor is all yours. I'll stop sharing right now.
Sean, thank you very much. And for everybody on board, good afternoon. And also thank you for your service to our country. Sean has mentioned what he did about my bio. I can tell you that everything you just heard, you should have been here yesterday morning. Despite what you heard, I was still ordered to take out the trash. There was no conflict there. I couldn't get angry there. I looked at my wife quite sternly and I said, okay. So I would like to thank Sean and my classmate Carl for the opportunity to present to you today the subject of conflict and anger management. I'm the president of a company called projectivities.com. I founded this just recently. We went almost literally totally live this morning. But Projectivities is designed to help people fix broken projects and otherwise fail-proof good ones so they don't get messed up. So that's what we do there. What we're going to talk about today is we're going to, first of all, get into some definitions, what conflict is and what anger is. And then we're going to leave you with some tools. We're going to leave you with one tool in particular. That tool has to do with a circle and what you can control within inside yourself. The other one is a line of how do you stop before you get as angry as that lady we just saw And you don't want to get out there and then all of a sudden explode. We don't want to do that. So we'll talk about those things as we go. Sean has agreed to help me with the presentation just so that we can make it interactive. And let's go on and get started, see where we end up. Okay. I'm trying to, oh, there we go. What is conflict? Conflict could be armed, right? I have certain things highlighted in a color, either blue, green, or red. It could be an opposing action of two different people. Something's incompatible. It could be an idea. It could be an interest. It could be a conflict of principles. There could be opposing needs for something. It could be forces. It could be, in a play, a dramatic action. You have a hero. You have a villain. Those are conflicts too. Those are set up to entertain us. Okay, moving further in, the nature of conflict, there's always going to be something that people will be in conflict about. And for any group that's together for any length of time, anybody have any examples of an inevitable conflict between people who are together for any length of time? Anybody? How long have any of you all been married?
All right, yeah, Mr. Rousey, if you open that up, I'm sure we might need about 3 or 4 hours for that one.
All right, so we'll just keep that one a food for thought. Food for thought, we'll move on. Okay, then what about different people with different viewpoints, ideas, and opinions? Let's see. There are people called Republicans, people called Democrats. Okay, we'll move on from that one too. All right. Conflict can occur whenever there's no internal harmony within a person or whenever there's a disagreement or dispute between two people. We've all seen those things happen also. Levels of conflict. Interpersonal conflict. We kind of talked about that in some of the slides already. Divergent ideas or interests or people, a conflict. Now, intrapersonal, that's within yourselves. And I'm going to use one example. When I was on active duty in the Marine Corps, you couldn't get promoted unless you had a photo of yourself in uniform. And also you had to meet certain height and weight standards. We had this one captain who had been prior enlisted who was up to make major. He had to go before the promotion board to make major. And let's just say that Captain Ed looked like Santa Claus in his dress blues. Now, you know, you can't be in the Marine Corps looking like Santa Claus in dress blues. So I got transferred to the unit. There was Big Ed, and people are saying he's up for major. If he makes it, he gets his 20 years. He's a good guy. He's a good guy. Now, I was in training and I was responsible for weighing people. Well, this great big walrus comes in and they're trying to tell me he weighs less than he does. I'm brand new, just get there, and all of a sudden, they said, well, here's what we've been writing him down as doing. I said, well, he's not there. They said, well, he'll lose it. Just write down, you kind of split the difference, write down where it makes it look like this man is losing weight. So if you know what the rules are and you're supposed to be, what? Making sure that people are in fact in compliance with the weight guidelines, and this guy's clearly not, but you've got command pressure saying, oh, he's a good guy, what are you going to do? So I wrote down some number and away it went. But that 30 days between the time I did that and the time we were back came by quite quickly. Now they're, oh, come on, you got to do it. No, because he gained weight. He was already big. He put on a couple extra pounds, and it's clear that this is not something that is serious with him. Now, what are the consequences if I do this? If I do this too many times and they decide later on that he didn't make the weight, they might go back to look at who verified this. Now, I'm on the hook for this. Fast forward to tape, he got promoted to major, didn't lose the weight, got thrown out of the military. And the weight didn't help because when he had to go defend himself, what do you think they saw? Okay, let's look at this thing called intra-group challenges. Oh, the 3 branches of the federal government, right? The executive, the legislative, and judicial. Do you think that they're at conflict? Turn on the news. Okay, let's move on. Negative connotations associated with conflict. Getting angry is a waste of time. They won't understand. Have any of you all experienced any of this? Anybody want to jump in and share their experiences? Afraid of the consequences. Confrontation is unprofessional. They'll only counter my argument. What kind of experiences have any of you all had with this?
Yeah, I think Mr. Miles, I'll jump in, and I'm sure Dr. Bruce, I'm sure you probably got some great stories you can share as well. I had to calm myself down real quick because when you said that Santa Claus in uniform, yeah, I was I was I was going on that one right there, so that one got me. But I can relate. I can relate. I remember throughout the service, I think sometimes you always ran into a conflict of whenever the values or the principles don't align. And I think is all about standards. And I think everyone was held to the same standard. And then anytime we see anything outside of that, it's a conflict. And I think that's that interpersonal where, hey, look, I'm not going to sign off on this because this is not going against, or it's going against, my values and my principles of holding up the standard or being the standard bearer for what I would like to say. So I think that situation was definitely relatable. But getting angry is a waste of time. I think on this slide, I agree with you. I think sometimes a lot of times we'll get angry and it doesn't really fix or resolve the situation. It only gave me high blood pressure and and made you lose focus on what it was I was supposed to focus on, and then you come back to deal with the same situation laid out in front of you. So I agree with that first point. Getting angry is a waste of time. I think sometimes getting heated a little bit, I think is good in certain situations, but I think getting angry or losing yourself in the process, I think is a waste of time. Yeah. Dr. Bruce, you got anything you want to add to it?
Yeah, absolutely. It comes down to emotional intelligence. I just went through this past weekend on Friday. I just became a certified facilitator. And one thing that we had to really harness was our emotional intelligence when we have people in the classroom or in the workplace that may be giving us a hard time. We can't just lose it and get angry on the podium or in front of these people. Now, anger is natural but unnecessary. But again, it comes down to emotional intelligence and making sure that we don't lose it. Make sure we keep our cool, but know that it's natural but unnecessary.
Thank you. Now, the one I wanted to look at is confrontation is unprofessional. The one thing I can say to the gathered audience here is I have a cousin who has transitioned into management in a government capacity in a very specialized area. She's been great as a technician, but she's been a year in an executive position. And one of the things that she would do was she would have confrontations and they would end up on email. For anyone out there who is in their career and at some point they have access to an email, make very, very certain before you hit the send button of what the consequences, good and bad, might be. Because I would equate having an email in many ways as being similar to someone firing a bullet. Once it's gone, there may not be any recovering what you've done. So you want to be very, very careful about that. Are there any other questions on this slide before we move on? Okay, let's move to the next slide. Oh, go ahead.
No questions. I was just going to add a comment. I think whenever someone does they might not be angry, but whenever you hit reply all, when it doesn't apply to all, I think we got to be careful with that. So I think that can also bring some conflict. So.
Yes, it can. Oh my heavens, yes. Okay.
I got a funny story. It wasn't funny at the time, but man, I was angry. This was maybe I was a major at the time, and I was angry at my boss. He wanted me to do something I felt like I shouldn't be doing. It should have been something like the administrative assistant was supposed to be doing. So I was angry. I emailed my wife and I said, hey, this right here, this is ridiculous. I don't really understand why I'm doing this. this is something that his administrative assistant should be doing. It's really not my job to be focusing on that. That went to him instead of my wife.
Oh, no.
Got to be more careful. Got to be
Oh,
more careful.
ouch.
Yeah.
Oh,
So the rest of that assignment was a bit awkward. But yeah. So to your point, David, got to be more careful. Yeah.
I guess it also, maybe you kind of stabbed the wound a little bit when you said, dear honey. Bad joke. I'll move on. Bad joke. Bad joke. Okay. Sources of conflict. Competition for limited resources. Now, limited resources. Now, one I was sharing with Sean was space out in front of my house. I live in a tight neighborhood, small houses on an island. I live in Long Island, New York. Now, we have in front of our house enough space to park cars between driveways. You can park maybe 2 SUVs. And the houses were designed that you have a driveway where you can put 3 cars in the driveway, 2 cars on the street. But what do you do when your neighbor has 7 or 8 cars and you only have 2? And then they have company lots of time also. Could there be a competition for limited resources if everybody wants to park in front of their respective house? Or what about now this one? You're going out to Walmart or you're out in one of the malls or whatever. And every once in a while, don't we hear in the news where people are getting in arguments? Sometimes they're getting shot and killed over a parking spot? Limited resource? I mean, even in my case, the one I just gave, maybe people could park further away, do whatever. But, well, if we want to make it global, what is happening right now with the price of gasoline? It's going up, right?
Going up.
Limited resource, why? Limited in the United States because we don't have enough refineries to make more gasoline. We're stuck at a certain level. So if all of a sudden we can't get enough of it, then the price of what we do get is going to go up. So that's what's happening there. That's a competition for limited resources.
Yep. David,
Disagreement. Go ahead, please.
No, I was going to say, I got another example. I think we all probably can remember either a year or 2 ago when the shortage of fuel was out there and how many conflicts we had at gas stations and stuff like that, people being in line, people trying to cut line, trying to get fuel. I think it was a lot of conflict during that time, you know, and everyone was trying to get to that limited resource at that time. So I think that was probably a good example. I'm pretty sure it's probably some people here on the webinar that probably experienced that. So to the group, I think I see most of the microphones on mute and most of the cameras are off. I don't know if you guys are, if you're aware of that, but if you wanted to turn your cameras on, that would be great. So yeah, but I just wanted to add that, David.
Thank you. Absolutely. Now, disagreement on how things should be done. Anybody experiencing that? A disagreement on how things should be done. I think we already heard that the one between Dr. X and his boss, how things should be done. A source of conflict might be your personal interest is different than the group interest. The group wants to do something one way and you want to do it another. One thing that I have done over the years, I've done these tabletop survival exercises where you're crashed in a jungle, you're in a desert, you're at sea. You've got these 15 items you got to basically choose from. You've got to rank these in an order. And then you and the group get together and you all rank them together again. And normally those rankings are different with the group than with your personal. And then we sit down and we look at both of what we did and the group did, and we compare that with what an expert says. Now, I've seen exercise like this where people, even though it was only a theoretical exercise, oh man, I'm not going to participate. You don't agree with me on this, that, or the other. I thought that the umbrella should have been number 5 and not number 12. You know, just crazy things like that, but things like that can happen. All right. Also, you have situations where people can be under stress or tension from someplace else, something else. and that can cause a problem. Or power and influence. One day while I was on active duty, I walked into one of the repair shops that I was responsible for, and I heard one of my young Marines, he was in there crying like crazy. You know, I joined the Marine Corps, he's a Lance Corporal, so you appreciate this now. I joined the Marine Corps because I didn't want people telling me what to do. Whoops. I think there's a problem there. I mean, did you watch any of the recruiting tapes before you signed on the line? You weren't drafted. But he didn't want people to tell him what to do. Then he was in a situation where everybody was telling him what to do. He had a conflict with this because he was somewhat of a free spirit, good technician, but somewhat of a free spirit. But there was a conflict within his mind in that he didn't want that much supervision. Let's move on. Negative factors of conflict. I think we're going to hit on some of them. It's a diversion of attention, impacts morale. But look at that one down at the bottom. Regrettable behaviors. Regrettable behaviors, or the polarization, us versus them, so to speak. But at the same time, it can damage morale, family, team relationships, and many different things that can go wrong from adverse conflict. Now, if you can get past that constructively, then maybe the other person's point of view or the way they've done something, some of it might actually rub off on you. It actually might be a good deal. But there are some risks. There's also a risk for us taking the next breath also. Let's move on. Positive factors. Stimulates interest, forum for discussions, cohesiveness. We just talked about some of that stuff. Learn new and different things. Provides a means to work together. Now, how do we manage conflict? We can report it, especially if, say, you and an equal partner, say for argument's sake, 2 different departments needing the same resource, can't work it out, then you might have to go to somebody higher up in authority. If it's a personal thing, you might want to look at walking away or just put it away for another time. It might not be worth the fight right then. You may have to just, I have a friend that's a West Point graduate, retired colonel. He would say back in the day, later in his career, power or dominance. If they were at meetings where there was a resource that he needed and his peer said a lieutenant colonel, the way this colonel put it to me, he's a good old boy from Texas, Dave, if I saw a lieutenant colonel sitting there and I decided this was something I wanted, I just run them off and I'd eat their cheese. And that's what he said. Third-party intervention. Anybody have any ideas about that? What does third-party intervention mean? Bringing somebody in is what, maybe a neutral party?
Yeah, basically a mediator.
Exactly, a mediator, somebody who doesn't have a dog in the fight, right? And integration and collaboration. Okay, let's move on. Anger, we'll talk about that. Now, the colonel's anger at his daughter's disobedience. I found this in the dictionary, but this fit a situation that happened in my house this time last year. My daughter, age 32 at the time, returned from California with the COVID-19 and the fires out there in the West. Her job allowed her to work from home here. And she and I had already had a problem with her attitude. Mom says, oh, please come home. This is unresolved. We in this house, I spent last year probably $20,000 to get a backup generator installed that works off the natural gas line that comes into the house. The first time we go to use it in a storm, it does not work. It doesn't work, it turns out, because it wasn't getting gas. It wasn't getting gas because either what? The installer didn't install it right, or the utility person didn't bring the gas in right. But either way, we're sitting in the dark in the house and we just paid $20,000 for a paperweight in the back of the house. At a certain point, my daughter, a tech worker, comes downstairs. I'm on the phone with the vendor, trying to get someone to get me some assistance to get a technician out here to get that fixed. Remember what you see in light blue there, the colonel's anger at his daughter's disobedience. At a certain point, The lady on the other end of the phone, the gatekeeper, decides she's got to get the owner of the business because whatever I'm after is going to take the employees into overtime, and she herself is not authorized to give it. So at a certain point, my daughter comes down the steps and she hears me on the phone, but she doesn't hear that the lady on the other end has said, "Let me go get the boss. I fully understand the situation." At that point, my daughter is spewing hateful things into the phone, which is clearly something that's being heard by the person on the other end. I'd stopped to make sure that I gave her a chance to have a voice, but then I'm hearing what she's saying. I said, "Okay, stop." She's getting louder. "Hey, shut up." She's not. "I asked you to shut up. Do it." She's getting louder and louder and louder. We have never had a conversation like this before, but she and mom have a relationship where they're best buddies. But I have told you several times to do this. You've been out and on your own for many, many years. You have rules in your house that you don't want people to break. You grew up in this house. You know you're not supposed to do this. So at a certain point, I, full disclosure, went full metal jacket on this girl for about 25 to maybe 30 seconds. Now, what does it say there down below? Anger usually develops in response to unwanted actions of another who is perceived to be disrespectful, demeaning, threatening, or neglectful. What do you think the situation I just gave you translated to?
Probably all of the above.
Yeah.
Maybe not neglectful, disrespectful, demeaning, threatening.
Check, check, check. So now we're friends now. Now here's the thing. Now her apartment, she lives in Brooklyn now, I live in Long Island. But back then her apartment was to be ready in about another 2 weeks, mercifully. Because if we were talking about months and months and months of this, and she's got a salary and everything, I would have been about a breath away from asking her to leave. Because whatever that person had become, that wasn't the person that she was raised to be. But this exact light blue quote here was out of the dictionary. When I saw that, I said, I am going to use that in this presentation. I don't even have to think about that. That happened. But we're friends now. We email each other, we text each other every day. We stay in touch. We're not going back down that road, but a defining point had to be made as to what happened. And sure enough, there was a problem with the unit. They did fix it. We've had many interruptions of power since, but we haven't had an interruption that has made her do what she did that day. We now know that's a line that she will not cross. Questions? All right, let's move on. Okay, okay, we just went through this case study. We just talked about that. So let's just pass this slide. Oh, here we go. Now, the slide you're looking at now, I want you to focus on that blue circle. That's all the stuff that could happen in the world, all the problems there could ever be. And let's look at that white circle that's inside of the blue circle. That's where we are. That's the me. Now, the object of what we're looking at right now is there are so many problems that are not yours. And what we have to do is make sure that those problems don't become ours. Now, how do we do that? If somebody all of a sudden comes in, they've got a problem, this, that, or the other. How many of you all know somebody who is heck bent on sharing their problems with you, whether you want to hear them or not? Anybody? Anybody get on your last nerves?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Now,
Yes.
they're coming to you with a problem. Now, I have somebody, I hope she's out of the house. She said she would be. 35 years we've been together. Dinner is a time where she will bring up something and say, well, what do you think? It might be something that's totally not my problem. And I'd have to say, well, what do you think? I'm trying to deflect that back because I'm trying to keep my circular integrity intact. In other words, I don't want anything in there. Just imagine now that not being a circle, but that being a boat, if for you Navy types, it might be a truck for you Army types or your UPS types. It might be a perimeter for you veterans that have done that. The more things you put in that inner circle, the greater the stress will be for you. Does everybody follow that? Your object is to keep that circle round because it's not going to roll, and your life has to be a rolling circle, so to speak. And if you allow all these other problems to come in here, let's make it a balloon. Let's make that inner circle a balloon. What happens if you put too much air into a balloon?
Explode.
Yes, boom. Your head will do the same thing. You want somebody to explode your head? I hope not, but it can. So I spent a day, this was back in 1980 when we were between wars. I had gone to a psychologist while I was on active duty. I was stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, drove the 250 miles out to Greensboro, North Carolina. And the one thing that psychologist gave me that I work with today is this particular circle. And he had to say to me, you can't solve all the problems that's out there. Decide on what you're going to bring into that circle and decide on what is thrown out of that circle. And what's thrown out, what's kept, determines who you are. Now, as time went on, I'll go back to 2014, I retired, and a long-time friend of mine through our wives, former Marine, very Catholic, taught me the Serenity Prayer. And that's what we see over on the left-hand side here, where it says, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Now, we're going to tie this back into the circle we just talked about. Give me the courage to change the things that I can. And that's the part that's inside of the white circle. Give me the wisdom to know the difference. That's where the prayer ends. Give me the wisdom to know the difference. But the thing that we want to also do is we want to have the independence to determine what we wish to retain, what we wish to prioritize and work on, and what we wish to discard and forget. It's almost like that Kenny Rogers song, what was it? You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. You notice I didn't sing that, right? Okay. Because I did have a singing career at one point. It was pretty vibrant. People would throw food, so I wouldn't have to worry about starving, but they wouldn't take it out of the can first. Let's move on. Bad joke, bad joke. Okay. Now, let's take these problems that have been listed by the Pew Research Group as being the major problems, 12 of the biggest problems facing the country right now. Now, some of this has changed because I've done this chart about maybe 3 months ago, but let me give you some idea of what we're looking at here. If you go off to the left of this chart, you will see items such as inflation, the affordability of healthcare, violent crime, gun violence, the budget deficit, climate change, quality of public schools, illegal immigration, racism, conditions of roads, bridges, and other infrastructure, unemployment, and the coronavirus. Now, if we go across the top, you'll see whether or not something's seen as a very big problem. That's in the darker gold, a moderately big problem, a small problem, or not a problem at all. Now, why don't we see if we can't take something like that and apply that to our lives and see how that might work. Oh, but what's missing from the chart? Everybody has slightly different challenges and opinions viewed through different lenses, right? Could that be a conflict? We see things differently? Yeah, we talked about that earlier. Okay, let's move on. Let's take a look now. Whoa, here we go. Back to the me chart, back to that circle. We have to sort things out ourselves. Now, we start out with, we see the Serenity Prayer and all that off to the left. However, what we want to do now is we want to get back to our circle and determine the information is coming in. We have to ask ourselves, is what is coming into our circle or trying to, is it a very big problem? Yes or no? And then we have to determine what we're going to do about it, of course, but maybe it's a moderately big problem. It might not be the biggest single problem that there is. Is it a small problem? Or look down below, it might not even be a problem at all. What we want to do is we want to have what's in that green space there, the independence to determine what we want to do with it. That's how we have to live our lives to keep our stress levels down. Are there any questions on that?
Mr. Miles, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So,
Hey guys, you can call me Dave, by the way, too. I'm so sick
right.
here.
Dave, this is Caroline.
Hi, Carol.
So like in theory, when I look at things like this, I would love to be able to let things go. But I'm sure that, like myself, a lot of people that are in the military are very type A personality, and we're not naturally inclined to just let things go, especially when it's something that invokes anger in us or we perceive as a very big problem that we maybe can't see a solution to. So I mean, like, what I personally struggle with letting things go. I obsess about things. I think about them constantly, and it makes me mad. And I understand you can't just be angry all the time, but then that ends up being anger internal, which leads to your very last thing you said there is the stress. So I mean, like, how do you train yourself to do this, to let things go or to prioritize? Or is this just it, is like being aware of it and forcing yourself to do it?
Well, I think being aware is one. The other thing we learned in the military is an after action report. Everybody familiar with that? After the war is over, after the battle is over, they first started that in the Civil War. After the battles, the losses were so great, people would look around the senior officers and say, well, wait a minute. What did we do? What did we think we were going to do? What went right? What went wrong? What should we do the next time? And the thing that I would suggest that maybe you do, I have to do it, is the next time. The next time this thing comes up, how will I handle it the next time? Does that help?
It does, yes, thank you.
Okay, now let's try another one. I'm an engineer. I'm probably the world's worst engineer, except I'm very industrious. And what I'll do sometimes, this gets back to your problem, is I'll look for a similar situation to the problem that I have to solve. And if I can piggyback off of that problem that is similar to mine and just make minor adjustments, that has helped me also. In other words, let's not build the same bridge twice. If somebody else has solved that problem, that's where the internet has become one of my best friends. Because I'll say to people, this is America. And in America, somebody someplace probably knows how to solve this problem. Get on the internet, just type in a few words and see if there's anybody out there. Don't confess, just see if there's any similar problem out there just generically and see if that might somehow come close to what you're trying to deal with. Any other questions? It was a good question, by the way. Thank you, appreciate it. No other questions. All right, let's move on to the next slide. The red line. Uh-oh. Let's go back to the example that I used with my daughter. Now, and virtually with anybody, but we'll start with that. What we have here is we have calm down at the bottom of the page, and we've got rage above a red line. Now, many decades ago, I had to go to a stress management course that my company had advised. They were looking for non-drug approaches to control high blood pressure. And in the course, they came up with this idea of the red line. And we might have heard people talking about this, such as Benjamin Netanyahu when he went to the United Nations a few years ago. The red line, as we're going to use it today, is the thing that we have to stay below. If there's something that's going to make us angry, getting back to the point, Caroline, you just made, what are those crazy adverse events that you can feel building inside of you that's going to get you angry? And at what point do you know where you might just, as they say, lose it? And the question becomes one is we have to manage that red line. How do we recognize when things are getting us to the point where our temperatures are rising, our balloon is rising, and we're approaching that red line? How do we manage to keep ourselves below the red line? Any ideas? What do you guys use to keep yourselves below that red line?
I think
Does anybody?
I'll take a stab at it. Yeah,
Okay.
I think some of the things I do to keep myself below that red line is one, I'm aware of what's creating the red line, and then also I try to change my focus on something else so it doesn't take me over or past the red line. For example, I guess I'm I guess a time I'm big on not wasting time, I would say. And so I think a lot of times if I'm meeting someone and someone's just 30, 40, an hour late or something like that, sometimes I get close to that red line. Uh, but what I'll do is right before it takes me over the edge, I might listen to a podcast or something like that, or listen to a video or read a chapter in a book. So I wouldn't just sit there and just be wasting time and let my focus on the person being late. So I change my focus on something else and it doesn't take me across the red line. So that's just something I normally try to do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Sean. Anybody else?
I think a lot of times I have to like walk away. Like I just
Mhm.
can't deal with it. I have to walk away and come back to it.
Yeah, that's a great strategy as well. And that's what I had to do with my daughter's situation. Is I went for a drive, and of course I came back after everybody was asleep, so I went to sleep as well. The next day we were off to a better start. But walking away is a wonderful thing. Now, one thing I'll bring up, my wife and I were in a car accident. We were down in Washington, D.C. at the Washington Monument back at the end of April. A car came up. We were driving at probably the speed that we are sitting right now and hit us at maybe 15 to 20 miles an hour. And then one person passed us, one car passed us. It turns out there were two cars involved in this, and got out of their car as if they were going to come and check on the damage. And they got in and drove away, and the second car came and drove away as well. But the point I'm trying to make is, in some cases, what I've noticed with red line conduct, people will start to approach each other in an angry manner. If your car gets hit or something happens, I'm thinking all too often when people start to approach each other in an aggressive fashion, that can raise the temperature and then bring something towards a red line. Has anybody had any experiences like that? I've had one where I've seen it where people have bumped into each other and immediately rage or, the one, I'll have to share this if we have the time. I was on the subway many years ago. It was the last good beating I got. Two women beat each other up on the subway, but I was in the middle of it all. Here's what happened. The subway had pulled into a stop, busy stop, it's rush hour. A brown lady is walking towards the exit, and she's shoving people out of the way as she's exiting the train. She shoved me as well. I'm towards the door, and she says, "Excuse me," shoving very violently. And at a certain point, there was an African-American lady who shoves this lady past me, hitting me in the shoulder, shoves this brown lady out of the train, calling her the B word. At that point, the train decides to stay in the station because they were being held for signal problems. The brown lady jumps back in the train over me, and these two women are flying. Their fists are flying all over the place. I'm holding on to a strap, reading a magazine about project management. And the next thing you know, all three of us collapse on the floor. These ladies are still pounding on each other. My face is blocking some of the punches. There was what still stays with me was there was no warm up to how these ladies got to that red line. As soon as that one got pushed, she shoved the other one, called her the name, and back in they were. How could that whole situation have been avoided? Any ideas? What could have changed things?
I would say the example that Caroline said would just walk away. Somebody could have walked away and avoided that situation.
Okay, that's one. The other was just accept the fact that you're dealing with an idiot. This person shoved their way out of the train. Now, in a perfect world, that train door would have closed and we would have gone on. But with the signal problem, is the conductor had to keep the train in the station. And let me tell you, the hair was pulled, the purses opened up, contents were all over the place. These were very attractive women. They could have each had their own magazine picture, but that rage, they went straight to that red line. So we have to be careful now that there are people in our society that will do the same thing. So I'd just like to leave you with that. Okay, let's move on. What are the possible consequences if you lose control? Look where I placed that red line now. It's a little lower. Now, the actions below the red line are things that we can control. Now, once you pass that red line, what are the possible consequences if you lose control now? Any ideas?
Yeah, I got a good example I can I'll put out there. I think as in some of the cities that we see, of course, all over the news today, we see a lot of gun violence and a lot of shootings. And I think, David, I think you touched on this at the beginning about once you throw that bullet out there, you can't pull it back. What I've noticed with a lot of young people and a lot of adults that sometimes they get themselves past that red line and want to use guns to solve their argument or their disagreement. And it's some of us probably, or if not all of us, can remember the days when we got mad. We used to just, hey, meet me at the playground, and we used to fight it out. We got a little dusty, we got a little dirty, but we went home, took a shower, and tomorrow was another day. But today people get upset, and the first thing they do is want to shoot over silly things, and so one of the things that I share with a lot of people I meet is don't let 5 seconds of emotion ruin your whole life, and I think that comes to knowing what that red line is, and not letting that red line just be all over the place. But that's something I want to share.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, you can cause irreparable damage. It's like the analogy when it's hard to put, it's impossible to put toothpaste back into a tube. Once it's out, it's out. I don't care how much it comes out or whatever, you're not putting that toothpaste. I tried. I don't know how many other people tried. But things that we say, people never forget. They may bring it back up when there's another argument in the future, and then that's when you know that's going to stick with that person, whether it's your spouse or your kids or somebody. So we have to be careful what we say. And I think it was Caroline that says sometimes the best to just walk away instead of saying something that is going to stick with that person, for a long time.
Well said, quite true. Now, the other possible consequence if you lose control is you might have more company. You see, if you stay below the line, these are the actions that you can control, and the things that Dr. Caroline has said is absolutely on point. But once, depending on how the control is lost, as Sean was saying, if somebody shoots somebody, suddenly now you're bringing in law enforcement and the justice system. There could be other situations. Parents spanking children now. All of a sudden, next thing you know, you're considered to be what? A child predator. I'm trying to think of an abusive parent or whatever else. Now you've got protective services, you're going to court, things like that. If you cross that red line. Now, the only one of those situations I can think of is that when I worked with a gentleman that was a pastor who also worked for my company. And he said that one of his children was a real bad actor. In other words, a PK, also known as a preacher's kid. But he wasn't going to have it in his house. And his son said, well, Dad, you've been known to cross he didn't call the red line, but we'll use the red line here. I can call Child Protective Services on you, and you'll go to jail. What do you think about that? And I have no idea where the story is going because I don't even know how we got on the subject, but he said, well, I told him, I said, well, son, you're right. You can do that. But you see, they're going to move me out of the house. I'll go to jail, but I'll get out. But I am going to ask that you be moved to foster care. And that could be with anybody, any place. I'm at least trying to do what I'm doing out of love. You can't know that about a foster family, but since that's what you want to do, would you like to use your phone or mine to make the call? Now, what he said happened after that was that his son straightened up.
Yeah.
Who knew?
it went straight to decision making at that point.
Yes. But sometimes you have to wait. You don't know how the conversation is going to end. I just had to wait for the answer because I had no idea of how this could end. It sounded like a very serious confrontation the way he described it. And this was a calm man for the most part on the job, but we never know what people's family lives are like. But he, at least at that point, he seemed to think that it was resolved, and that's been 9 years ago. So I certainly hope it has been. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Are there no other questions or comments, please? Oh, questions. That's where we are, actually. Are there any questions? Anything that we didn't cover or should have covered? Okay, well, what we did cover is we covered the circle. Now, what do we say about that circle? We have to determine what's going to be put in it, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, the other thing, and I don't have it here, but I've used it in other presentations, is that the world that we live in, we carry around in our minds. And we could play a little game right now if you want. If I use the color red, if I said, look for something red where you are. Look around, you probably found it. You probably have found that at the expense of looking at other things. Your mind is a computer. It will lock on to whatever it is you program it to lock on to. So when we talk about conflict and anger, if we can recognize, and that came up, I think Caroline did a good job of explaining recognition. If we can recognize some of these things that can get us crazy, and we decide that we're just not going to let it happen, many times you can frustrate, especially if it's another person, you can frustrate them away from trying to get you angry. I had one situation working for the utility where I had two very senior supervisors that I was managing. And this one said to me, I can't get you angry. You have been trained. Somehow you've been trained because I've done stuff that's gotten other people angry and it doesn't get you angry. Well, who's getting angry as he's talking? He is. It took him years to calm down because whatever it was, he was set in his ways. I introduced change. Of course, race was a part of it too. But the point is that if you can recognize that certain things are trying to happen and you know they're going to happen, and you can come up with a tool set to stop that in advance, many times you can disarm the other person by your being, as young people say, chill.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have. I hope I've helped you in some way. It's also therapy for me.
Yep. David, hey, look, I wanted to also add to everything that you had taught us today about identifying your triggers. You know, I think identifying triggers and what triggers that anger within you, I think is important, especially in the workplace. I'm pretty sure that everyone has a particular trigger that, hey, look, if someone does that or someone says that, it's just going to set me off, you know. And I think if you identify that within yourself, then when you see it, you can probably laugh it off versus letting that emotion control you. For an example, I would say one of my triggers has always been if someone would spit on me or something, or spit near me or something like that. You know, I'm liable to turn into a Incredible Hulk or something like that. You know, I think you know, I'm gonna lose all control at that point. I already know it. You know, I know that's a trigger. You know, and so I think, but it takes a lot to get me angry, and I think, but that's one of them. So I try to avoid that situation at all costs. But I would challenge everyone on the session today just to identify your triggers. You know, and that way you can control that anger and not let that anger control you. David, I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. And to everybody out there, just remember, and Sean and I talked about this yesterday, less than 1% of our population has served in the military. So people are not going to understand us as well as we might want them to. You might be the only veteran that they know for, who knows, years, months, distance, however, but you're representing all of us.
Yeah, that's it. Dr. X, you got any final words you want to leave out there?
It's always great to hear David. Great speaker, very practical and immediately applicable information that he shares with us. So appreciate you, David. Thank you. Sean. This has been great.
Yes, I agree. And David, one last thing. I want to go back to the situation with your daughter before we leave. What do you think actually resolved that? Do you think it was the Full Metal Jacket? Do you think the generator actually started working again? What do you think the resolution
No.
was?
None of the above. Let me give you what actually happened that made it. Because what I ultimately did was I sent her a text about 2 days later or so.
Mhm.
And I asked her because she and her mother are best friends. Now, they don't have best friends per se. They have people they've been around for years and years and years, but they are each other's best friends. But you see, I don't ascribe to the theory that my daughter and I are going to be buddies. She knows that. She's known that since birth. What I did was I sent her a text asking if we could communicate at least, if not every day, every other day. And we do that. And we started it right after that. Not long after, a couple of weeks later, her apartment was available. And we still do that now. It's been a year now. But the last time we had a text with each other was last night. And I think that had a lot to do with it, so that, you know, she's not doing things. There's things a mom can say to a best friend that's somebody she grew up with that she really shouldn't be sharing with her daughter that she gave birth to. So, but the fact that the daughter knows me in a different way than what she did before the generator went out, I think has helped a lot.
Good deal. Good deal. Miss Caroline, do you have anything that you want to say before we close out?
Just thanks again. Thank you, David, for your excellent presentation today. And thank you for those who joined us. And I look forward to our future webinar series.
Yes, I will echo the same thing. I look forward to our future webinar series. I want to thank everyone that attended today. Mr. David Miles, I definitely appreciate you for doing the presentation for us today. Dr. Bruce, I appreciate you for coming on board as always. To the group, NAMVETS, our next webinar series will be on attitude. So I like to say attitude controls your altitude. So we look forward to everyone joining. Grab someone, another veteran within your organization, and say, hey, look, jump on this next session. We look forward to seeing everyone. Hope everyone have a great day. Thank you, and NAMVETS out.
Okay,
Thanks,
take care,
Sean.
buddy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.